So before we proceed, I thank you to SkinPick for giving us these free webinars. Um, oh yeah, there's one more thing. So usually they offer a promotional code for new clients. They've increased the offer for this month, so there's a new code, and they will give you $100 off for the first month. So keep that in mind. I didn't turn on the poll this evening because we will have a special topic for next month's webinar, and then we'll continue with normal polls. So you can suggest topics and you can vote on them next time. So let's keep that as a surprise for you. So let's look at the questions. Love these webinars, you're the best. Well, thank you for thinking I'm the best, but I'm glad you like the webinars. I just don't think I'm the best, but thank you. You may have confused discipline with disciple. Disciple means student. Discipline has to do with training. Yes, I hope I clarified this. I didn't confuse them. They actually have the same origin. They both come from the same word in Latin. So yeah, I don't know what else to add to this. As you talk about discipline, what comes to my mind is meditation practice, which also places heavy emphasis on discipline. Beyond the shared notion of discipline, in terms of consistently maintaining one's practice, do you think that skin picking is ultimately something that can be stopped by attaining full awareness and accepting the transitory nature of all things, including whatever it is that makes someone pick? Well, like when you say that, I can say yes. I just don't know that attaining full awareness is a goal that one should actually set for oneself. Personally, I wouldn't. I'm just speaking for myself here. I don't think I would ever set that as my goal. I don't know if that's actually attainable. Like in some abstract sense, attaining full awareness and accepting the transitory nature of all things is just, add emptiness to all that and you've achieved nirvana. I don't know that this is something that maybe you're spiritually more developed than I am. To me, that just doesn't seem like a goal worth striving towards. Like it may be something that I can look up to, a value maybe, but I would differentiate between values and goals. Goals are derived from values, but goals should be practical and achievable. So I would say that, for example, you can place an emphasis on accepting impermanence of things because that can practically help you if you understand, but not understand intellectually, but embody this idea that urges come and go. Yes, that can absolutely help you stop picking. Even if you don't know why you have the urges, just having the ability, the equanimity to stay calm and just observe them coming and going will absolutely help you not pick. Yes. And I agree also that meditation practice and in general, meditation teachers place heavy emphasis on discipline. But again, even in meditation practice, discipline is a compassionate thing to do. It's being gentle to yourself. It's not violent. You don't need to overpower anything, right? So let's say you're meditating daily, but you're working towards meditating instead of 15 minutes to meditating 30 minutes, right? So you're not going to just force yourself to sit there and suffer. You will do 5 minutes more and then 10 minutes more and so on. So there is progression even in that world, with the possible exception of Zen monks. They're really very radical. The putting hands in the lap, how long? So the putting hands in the lap thing is an exercise which I tell my clients to do in the beginning. So what I tell them is just put your hands in your lap with your palms up and just, it depends on, usually I advise 2 to 5 minutes depending on how intense your urges are, because the point is not to overwhelm you immediately. The point is just to learn how to observe what's happening in your hands. And kind of building on the previous question about awareness, that is also an excellent awareness exercise. So start with 2 minutes and just observe. You will notice that the urge will probably become stronger. It will spike at some point, and then it will slowly diminish. And you can actually use this as an exercise to teach yourself more discipline. It's just that you have to be careful and do it slowly. And if you have someone that you live with or someone that you trust, they can be there for you to help you, maybe even hold your hand. Alternative to this is to actually just sit on your hands for a while, because that will make it more difficult to just impulsively start picking if you become overwhelmed with the urge. I've had shingles since Christmas, so 54 days now. The skin condition is on top of my chronic eczema. Recently began and diagnosed. It's not going away, and I keep picking off the scabs. Am I hindering my healing? Well, not only are you hindering your healing, if you're talking about healing the eczema, you're actually potentially creating complications, because one of the unfortunate consequences of picking is that you can get a skin infection. And I've had clients who've had quite serious infections. And when your skin already has an issue like eczema, that makes things slightly worse. So you're putting yourself at risk, but there's no use in judging yourself there. Just dedicate yourself to doing better with picking. No need to torture yourself. Can you talk about self-binding techniques and how they relate to discipline and willpower? So I don't know what techniques you're referring to. So if you can give me an example, I will be happy to answer the question if I know. If not, I will, since I recognize the name, I will email you, since I have to respond to your email anyway. Sorry, I scrolled accidentally. I want to stop picking because it's embarrassing being seen with a bright red, swollen, clearly self-harmed face. But then I feel shallow for caring so much about one, appearance, and two, other people's opinions of me. So you can see how here you're just kind of adding more shame on top of shame. Or rather, you're adding guilt on top of shame because you feel shallow, and then presumably that is not a good thing for you to feel, and then you'll feel bad about that. So cut through all that immediately. Really, what I said in the beginning, think about what your values are. If other people's opinions of you are so important, that means that perhaps some of your values are defined in such a way that you give too much power to other people. The reason why I emphasized values so much, in addition to the fact that acceptance and commitment therapy, which we heavily use in SkinPick, does a lot of work with values, the actual reason why I did it is because values give you internal validation. Like when I do something that aligns with my values, I don't tend to care very much about how other people perceive that, which is why the intention setting for certain situations is quite important. Let me give you an example. Sometimes, especially when you're in my line of work as a therapist, you have to make decisions that will annoy or upset your clients. But as long as you know that you're doing that in the best interest of your client, then you're fine. It doesn't matter if the client's upset. You obviously can and should be compassionate and kind to them, but ultimately, them being upset at you is not a reflection of how good you are as a therapist. It's a reflection of what that situation means to them. So let me give you a practical example of this. When maybe like 7 or 8, 9 years ago, it was a long time ago, I had a client who had bipolar disorder, and at one point he felt like he doesn't need his medication anymore, which is something that happens quite often, especially with young people, until they cycle a few times and learn that they do need the medication. And he started slipping into a mania. So I tried to point it out. We had these kind of cues. We discussed how I can point that out, but none of that worked. We had like 2 or 3 strategies, and none of them worked. And so at one point I said, "You will now go and see your psychiatrist right after our session." I will give him a call because, incidentally, it was someone I knew from medical school. I will give him a call and tell him that you will be there. If you don't come, we're not working together anymore, because it became quite difficult. And I didn't feel like it was ethical of me to continue working with someone who was in such a bad shape that couldn't even put a coherent sentence together. My client did that, but then we had to spend 6 months working on trust and him feeling safe around me. This was obviously necessary work, but at the same time, I can't say that I regret. Like there was a lot of bad words that I heard afterwards because he was hospitalized, and then when he was released, he was very angry with me. Um, but I know I did the right thing because this is what you do in those situations. I have the knowledge and I have my ethics, and to me it was clear. So when your internal values are aligned and clear, then what other people think of you doesn't really matter. So for you specifically, to go back to the actual question, it's not about judging yourself as shallow or this or that. Think of this as not having values that are well defined. And then see, like, what is it that you want people to see, but look past the appearance. So it doesn't matter if your face is red or orange or glows in the dark. Think about what is it that you want people to see, and then think how you can become that person, putting your appearance aside. And then you will set yourself in a decent direction to reflect on your values. I guess I want to stop because I think I'll feel more confident and more likely to find a friend. Um, So being confident seems like a good goal, but the question is, why is it that picking would stop you from being confident? So think about how those two are linked. That's a good way to start reflecting on values, and then you'll know, what control you have there. And then the second part, more likely to find a friend. Um, would you say that then loneliness is what motivates you to stop picking and think about the external internal thing that I just mentioned and how that relates? I have been diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, and I'm following the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, who relates ADHD more with trauma rather than biology and genetics. In keeping with this, how can my skin picking be helped? I often feel overwhelmed. Thank you. Yeah, he's a very interesting person. His son is also a great journalist. Um, so I don't know exactly what his opinion is on ADHD, and I don't like to generalize things in that way. Like, some ADHD isn't related to trauma, but if you feel that it is for you, then that's the only thing that counts, really. I don't. So ADHD or no ADHD, skin picking is an independent problem. The first thing for you to figure out is how they interact. If you're taking medication for ADHD, pay attention to those patterns of picking. Do you pick more when the medication wears off, or while the medication is still working, or before you take it? So that will give you a good idea of, where to be additionally vigilant if that's something that you can discern. The second thing is, the connection with ADHD and picking exists, or at least I see it very frequently in clinical work. And the connection is usually anxiety, because when you have difficulties sitting still, when you have difficulties controlling your impulses, which happens with ADHD, and when your attention is all over the place, one becomes anxious because those are very anxiety inducing states. So think about maybe attention training and relaxation. So mindfulness would be both of those in one. So that would be a good step to remove the causes of this. And then parallel to this, I would strongly suggest that you simply start implementing habit reversal training, because that's something that you can even do on your own, and then deal with picking practically in everyday situations. So improving focus, uh, working on reducing anxiety, and then implementing habit reversal. Those three things parallel to each other. Um, I try to do this simplification when I'm anxious when I leave my house. I say you're standing outside the shop rather than you're standing outside the shop. You could be in danger. Everyone's watching you. You look like a tramp, etc. It does help a bit. Yeah, it does. The only thing where you shouldn't stop is like when you simplify the situation, like go down to those bare basics. Try to create a narrative that gives you more degrees of freedom. Because what the Stoics will tell you, what any CBT therapist of any kind will tell you, and what every constructivist, including myself, will tell you, is that what you choose from doesn't usually come from the outside. The outside world, to a certain extent, limits our abilities, but by creating different problems and limitations. But the choices that we have is something that comes from our previous experience. And based on our previous experience, we anticipate what might happen, and then we choose based on this. So essentially, you have a story running in your head. One of the reasons why mindfulness helps with mental health so much is that it changes the activity of something that's called a default mode network, which is this, I guess it's not a part of your brain, it's like a network of neurons in your brain that tell the story of who you are. It's like that internal narrator that tells you you're doing this, you're this kind of person, you're that. It's like the internal judge of things, right? So if you tell a different story, you will actually see different possibilities. I know that this sounds almost like magic, but at this point, it's pretty much kind of established psychology. It's also easier said than done. Um, I'm also 71 and have been biting my nails. Also, this is a continuation from a previous response. Sorry, since I don't see the name, then I don't know what question should I attach this to. I often pick without even realizing. By the time I notice what my hands are doing, the damage is done. How can I make myself become more aware of the oncoming picking so I can apply these tools before I unintentionally start? So, if you have money to invest, you can buy one of those bracelets that vibrate when you move your hand. So that will certainly alert you, to the fact that you're about to pick, because you can train them to specifically warn you of the picking movements. That would be one thing. A cheaper alternative would be to find a bracelet that makes a lot of noise, or a bracelet that's very heavy, because that will immediately kind of bring your attention to your hand every time when it moves. You can wear a watch that's really heavy as well. One thing that you can do, and people hate doing this, but this is really effective, use gloves. Gloves, because if you touch your face with your hands, and you're already used to this because you do that over and over and over again, when you use gloves, just touching your skin will feel differently. So you will trigger your attention. So you will be more attentive. And in addition, gloves will create a mechanical barrier so that you can't actually do any picking. Those would be some ways. In addition, if you can journal, write things down, see patterns, you can use the app. SkinPick has an app which is free, and you can download it and use it for yourself. The app will automatically generate certain statistics when you have enough data, so it will analyze some of it for you, so you can see where you are, for example, when you pick, and then you know where you have to be more attentive. So those would be some ways that you can deal with those mindless aspects of picking. Program issue, I got a notice that said the meeting is at 8 p.m. EST. Why is it available for later viewing? So all the webinars are available. I don't know why you got that notification, because webinars, so this is something that I can pretty much guarantee you that it will always be like this. Because of my schedule, every webinar will start at 6 p.m. EST, always. Ha ha ha, I love the Marcus Aurelius quotes. You're fun, Dr. Miletic. Well, thank you. That's one of the nicer accusations. Thank you so much. I used to hate the word discipline before your talk because I thought it meant perfection. Thank you for teaching me otherwise. Oh yeah, discipline is not about perfection at all. In fact, it's really far from perfection, because at least the way Stoics talk about discipline, perfection is not even the goal. The goal is just to get better at what you do. So no relation. I don't like if you about a year and a half ago we had a webinar about perfectionism, so you can go back and listen to that and you'll see exactly how I feel about perfection. Not a big fan. I don't think it's useful. Should I sit with the urge when I get it and just deal with it? Well, I don't know what just deal with it means, but if you just sit with the urge, don't sit and suffer. Sit and observe the urge. That would be a more productive thing to do. You can sit with the urge and do a breathing exercise to make it easier on yourself. That's the difference between discipline, which is compassionate and gradual, and willpower, which is which doesn't really have a lot of mercy. So there's no point in sitting with something that you find unbearable. Sit with it for 2 minutes today. Sit with it 2.5 minutes tomorrow. So just do it gradually and have a competing response on hand in case it becomes too much so that you can do something to relieve some of the tension. And if you combine sitting with the urge with a breathing exercise, like my client mentioned box breathing because it's very simple to learn, so I usually suggest that one. So that's one thing that you can do. Just try to make it easier on yourself. Remember, making things worse and suffering unnecessarily really isn't a virtue. Great job. I love your reference to the Stoics and CBT. Well, thank you. I'm conflicted about the Stoics, but they do have very useful techniques and some very funny ones too. Thank you. You're very good, and I appreciate the work you put into these webinars. Well, thank you. What if the urge is overwhelming itchiness? I'm getting the impression that you're kind of bouncing off of something that I said earlier, but urge can be overwhelming itchiness for some people. And in this case, there are several avenues. You can treat it as in the way that I described, and it doesn't have to be treated differently. But if you actually have an itch, it might be good to have a dermatologist look at your skin because you might have a skin condition that is treatable. And then also, by all means, do something to relieve there are several over-the-counter anti-itch creams that you can safely use and that usually have no serious adverse effects. So just go to your local CVS or Walgreens and they can give you something. So we're talking about kind of control and discipline here, but there's really nothing wrong with removing the triggers. Again, unnecessary suffering isn't very useful. Is there any evidence or inquiry around the use of cannabis, particularly edibles, to help people stop picking? My experience is that cannabis helps dial it all down and feel a sense of overall calm, gratitude, and well-being, which makes me less inclined to pick, which makes sense. I feel a sense of love for myself when I've used cannabis. I'm seeing a lot less stigma around cannabis since its full legalization is in my home country, Canada, and widespread medical related availability in many US jurisdictions. There is no research. And I've noted if it helps you, go ahead and use it. That's very simple. If it does what you described that it does for you, go ahead and use it. I've noticed that it doesn't always have that effect on everyone. Sometimes what it does is actually makes people more complacent, so they're more likely to follow through on the urge to pick. So I suggest you try, and then not just you, when I say you, I mean like all of you. So if that's something you want to consider, try, see how it works, and then make an informed decision, because I've seen it work in both ways. So it just depends, I guess, on the effect that it has on you. But there are no studies. Someone asked me about this a few months ago. I tried to find something and I really didn't find anything. Overall, there's not too much research into body focused repetitive behaviors, so not a surprise. Wearing gloves is a binding strategy. Removing mirrors. Binding is used in addiction therapy. An example would be not to carry cash so that it's not easy to buy drugs. I find that that's something that we could call stimulus control, right? So kind of reducing the lights in your bathroom if you pick in front of the mirror, or just staying away from the mirror. If you're concerned about, let's say, how other people perceive you, if you stand a few feet away from the mirror, you will see exactly how people will perceive you, and you'll be less likely tempted to pick. You can use a timer. There are many of these. Wearing gloves would also be a binding strategy then. It's a stimulus control. I think they're very useful. You need consistency to decondition yourself. But overall, I wouldn't necessarily associate these with discipline, because discipline is about you actively doing something to, based on your values. And these strategies tend to kind of prevent you from even working on the issue, but they are effective. So that is an approach to take for sure. Does skin picking go along with mental illness? Well, it's a bit of a loaded question. I don't like the term mental illness in this. Skin picking is a psychological disorder, so it's called excoriation disorder or dermatillomania, which sounds bizarre, but it's a word. So it is a psychological disorder. Sometimes it will come with other body focused repetitive behaviors like hair pulling or nail biting or cheek biting, any of these. It comes often with anxiety issues, with OCD. So it can come joined with other problems as well. Um, so there are a few compliments here. Pardon me, but I mean, I'm very grateful and I'm reading them all. I just feel bizarre complimenting myself out loud. When I pick, I go into a trance, and I often do it when I want to reflect on something, often stressful. My values to stop picking are wanting to appear healthy, but I feel like it doesn't compete with my motivation to pick. I suppose it's a motivation, not a value. Well, again, like you wanting to appear healthy and being healthy are two very different things. You can put on makeup and appear healthy, but it doesn't mean, that you are. Right, I don't know, like uh, I wouldn't say that wanting to appear a certain way is a value, but wanting to be healthy could be a value for you. For Stoics, it would be one of the indifferents. They would call it a preferred indifferent, because being healthy can help you, be more virtuous and act in accordance with your values further on. Think about uh, whenever you formulate something with "I want to appear," don't think of that as a value. Just think what's behind it. That's where the motivation will come from. Um, I feel like wearing gloves will be most effective, but will make people ask questions, which will cause even more anxiety. Yeah, I guess that depends on where you are. I mean, gloves are very effective, but like any strategy, like they're not limitless and applicable everywhere. If you work from home, you can pretty much wear them every day. At home, you can wear them all the time. But if people ask questions, there's always the possibility of telling them none of your business. It's actually a very good exercise in setting boundaries. You can do it kindly or you can do it as directly as I did it, because that is exactly what I would tell them. I'm wearing them because I want to wear them. What you gonna do now? You don't really have to justify anything you do to other people. But if wearing gloves, I mean, just because I understand that not everyone will choose my, borderline rude way of dealing with these issues. If gloves don't work, then maybe finger covers can. You can also consider there are a lot of these competing responses, these little things that you can use when you feel the urge to pick that you can keep in your pocket. So let me see so I have a worry stone here. Like that's one thing. So something you can play with and rub. There are different kinds of worry stones will have different textures. So for some people that seems to be a good response. You can keep it in your pocket, for example. You can wear a spinner ring. I don't have one. I bought one so that I can show it to people, and then I managed to lose it within 5 days. So it's a ring that you wear in your hand, but it's basically two rings. One you can spin or the other. So you can essentially use that as a way to kind of direct the anxious picking energy into something else. And because it's just a ring that you wear on your hands, no one can possibly suspect anything. You can wear mala beads or rosaries or any other kinds of prayer beads, like all these things, or bracelets even, and just play with them. That's also something you can do. I mean, if people feel the need to ask you why is it that you're holding your own bracelet in your hand, then these people are just nosy. Um, So thank you for this webinar and for all you do for us. I'm in need of someone to look at my skin to help me physically heal my skin in combination with healing emotionally via therapy. However, every time I go to the dermatologist, they say just don't pick. Do you know of any type of doctor that is skilled in both skin picking and dermatology? Well, that would be someone that has many years of training. I don't know anyone who does both. So whenever your dermatologist says just don't pick, I mean, I would suggest that you either tell them that that's not useful advice, if you just don't want to tell them to shut up. And just tell them that you're here to help so that they can help you heal your skin, not to tell you what to do. It's really not their job to give psychological advice. So what they need to do is just give you something for the skin. Now, depending on what, so you can, there are some things that you can do even without a dermatologist. If depending on what your kind of what condition your skin is in. So sometimes it really helps after you finish picking to just wash your skin with water and just some mild soap or some cleansing solution that is very, very mild. That's very important because you don't want to irritate your skin any more than it needs to be. And then afterwards you can just buy like an over-the-counter antibiotic cream and just put it on the skin to prevent infections. That should be fine. Take vitamins that will help you nurture your skin. So vitamin B would help. Vitamin C helps with collagen synthesis, and collagen gives kind of a skeleton to your skin. So that's the first thing that your skin needs to actually be able to heal. Put colloid patches over the wounds. That will also help you heal. So those are all the little things that you can do even without consulting a dermatologist. And usually I have to say that is sufficient unless we're talking about very extreme wounds. I understand the question about itching, as this is the physical sensation I have during urges, and equivalent to your client's example of hands burning. My solution was to buy a miniature back scratcher and always carry it in my purse. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Sometimes, like there's when we're talking about the itch, it helps to distinguish between, let's say, the psychological and the physiological itch. I'm making this division up now for the sake of being practical. If your skin is dry, even if it's healthy, it'll itch. So that's something that just comes from having dry skin. If you're older, sometimes skin in older people tends to itch. It has to do with metabolic changes in our bodies as we grow older. So that's also something that's not a psychological issue. It's an actual thing that you can deal with by applying creams and ointments and solutions of different kinds. And then sometimes itchy skin can actually be a symptom of anxiety. Have you noticed like sometimes people will start like scratching their heads when they're very nervous? It's not because suddenly they've developed dandruff or because suddenly their skin became dry. It's because they're anxious. And then one of the ways in which anxiety can manifest itself is itchy skin. If that's what it is, then whatever you apply, it's not going to help because the what you actually need to deal with is the anxiety. So then finding a way to calm yourself is a much better approach. So when it comes to the itch, just make sure to discern between these two. Um, I see that there are a few other questions. I don't think we have time to go over all of them because I'm slowly losing my voice. Um, so I see one, there was like a repeated question that I didn't answer, which is about the webinars. You will receive an email once they're uploaded to YouTube, and you can just find our channel on YouTube. I will try to upload them tomorrow at some point, but just wait, you'll get an email in a couple of days. I see that there are some other questions here, some longer, some shorter. If you feel like you didn't get an answer from what other people have asked, you have my email here, and our support team can also help you with psychological questions since a psychologist will answer your email. So email me or them, it doesn't matter, and give me a couple of days. If I don't answer, because usually I receive at least 24 emails after every webinar, so sometimes I will forget to answer or it'll take me a couple of days. If you don't hear from me in 3 or 4 days, just give me a nudge and tell me, hello, there's an email for you to respond, and I will respond. It's really not personal, and it's not that I want to respond. It's just that sometimes I forget, and I do this on my own time, like the responding to emails. So I usually do that after I finish my workday when my brain power is kind of limited. So if I skip your email, please send me a reminder after a couple of days. Thank you for sticking around, and come back in March. I hope you will enjoy. I'm really looking forward to the surprise webinar. Have a pleasant evening, and see you in support groups and in March.